Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Martin. I'm back for section 13 of 910. Today's reading is actually going to pack two characters in because we're going to finish up the 910 section of the novel. So we have Naheed immediately here in Columbus, Ohio, and then stay tuned because in the on deck circle we've got Will in Shanksv. So let's jump in with Naheed. As always, we have our setting. So we are now at the night of September 10th. This is the night before the tragic events, and so we have a general idea of what's impending. If you remember the last time we talked about Naheed, she was indeed feeling very guilty, but still not brave enough to confront the situation with Eliza. So I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith that maybe Naheed will get motivated and come around and make things better. That evening, Naheed could not wash enough for Ruzu. Nori was already finished. She didn't need any help remembering. Face, hairline to chin, forearms, elbow to fingertips, right then left, scalp. And lastly, feet. Right foot with right hand, left foot with left, toes to ankles. Nori ran water over the tops of her socks and called it a day. But Naheed couldn't wash long or hard enough. Before you can pray, you need to wash. You need to be clean, not just of real dirt, but of all the bad things you might have done with your hands, your ears, your eyes, your mouth, your words. Annoying Eliza, annoying Eliza. So this is just a little reminder for you. This term refers to a cleansing ritual that is used before reading the Quran, which is the holy book of the Muslim faith. And I would like to point out to you that there's a very specific order in which things are supposed to be done. And because Nori's young, she could probably get away with doing kind of a superficial job of things, kind of the way when you were a little kid you could get away with brushing your teeth kind of half-heartedly, and the adults wouldn't be too upset with you. But Naheed is in 6th grade. She knows better. And in this case, she legitimately feels this. She feels that she has done bad things and that she wants to get clean of them. And so for her, this cleansing isn't just about cleansing her body, it's about cleansing her conscience. She feels guilt. Let's continue. In her mind, Naheed could see Eliza's sad face while she was trying to eat her lunch in the cafeteria, even though Naheed hadn't turned around to see her once. All Eliza needed was one friend, and she could probably have handled the teasing. Maybe even laughed it off. But alone, it was a tsunami. Now, the idea of something being a tsunami, which essentially means a tidal wave, is obviously not literal here. Doesn't mean that water flooded the cafeteria. No. We have a metaphor. Because all of the negativity and all of the teasing really did drown Eliza in that moment in the cafeteria. That's why she felt so emotionally overwhelmed, because she was emotionally drowning. People were picking on her in such fierce quantity that it was insurmountable for her. She couldn't handle it on her own. When Naheed crawled into bed that night, Nori was already asleep. Naheed would get her own room back when Uncle Iman and Aunt Judith left the next day, but for now, her little sister occupied the trundle bed right below. Psst. Hey, did you catch that? Uncle Iman and Aunt Judith left the next day? It's kind of interesting, in light of what we know. Naheed's mother appeared in the doorway. Are you all tucked in? Naheed answered, and her voice cracked when she spoke. Yeah, I am. Instead of moving away, her mother opened the door farther, letting light from the hall fall across the two beds, separating them right in half, light and dark. She stepped inside and sat down on the end of Naheed's bed, careful not to rustle Nori. There was really no need. Nori had been known to fall asleep right at the dining room table at late-night suppers and stay asleep while everyone cleaned up. Some trick that was. What's wrong? Naheed's mother asked. Naheed wanted to say nothing because she wanted that to be the truth, and because the last thing Naheed needed was for her little sister to hear any of this. She said as softly as she could, "Something bad happened today." "Something bad?" her mother whispered back. She rubbed Naheed's feet under the blankets. "At school?" Only just as Naheed was going to tell her mother about how she had been mean to Eliza because she didn't want anyone being mean to her, but then it got all out of control and everyone started being mean to Eliza too, something entirely else came out of her mouth. So before we move on to what she actually says to her mother, look at these thoughts. She had been mean to Eliza because she didn't want anybody to be mean to her. So it's the opposite of what you would expect. If you don't want people being mean to you, you should be kind to other people. Instead, this shows us irony, right? And we've talked about this, a little bit of hypocrisy. The idea of what is good for me is not necessarily what I'm going to apply to you, okay? So, she definitely sees there's a disconnect between the person she wants to be and the person she is acting as right now. However, that doesn't stop her from misleading her mother. So let's listen. "Two boys were teasing me about my hijab," Naheed said. "Oh, and what did they say?" her mother asked. "Well, one of the boys wanted to know if it was hot under my scarf all the time, and the other boy said he thought I went bald in 3rd grade, and that's why I had to keep my head covered." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing." Which was sort of the truth. Nothing. We've talked about this, Naheed. People don't understand, and it's your job to show them that you are proud of who you are, and teach them. Let them see that we are not like what they see on television and in movies. You can do that, can't you? Naheed nodded. She could do that. She just hadn't. Because it was easier to have the unwanted attention on someone else than to have to explain. This is the sad truth. She took the easy way out. And the thing you will learn, my dears, is in life, the easy thing is seldom the right thing, and the right thing is never easy. All the time, and have people stare and ask more questions. Sometimes I wish I didn't have to be Naheed the Muslim girl. I wish I could just be Naheed. Her mother laughed. And who would that be? Naheed shrugged her shoulders up to her ears. Be strong. And don't let silly boys who tease you ruin your day. Her mother kissed her daughter on the top of her head. There will be silly boys always. Their words cannot hurt you if you don't let them. If you know who you are. Now tomorrow's Tuesday, a fresh start, right? And remember, I have to leave for work early, so get some sleep now, okay? Naheed's mother lifted herself from the bed. Good night, Naheed. Good night, Mommy. And good night, Nori, their mother said. Nori didn't miss a beat. Good night, Mommy, she answered. So Nori had been awake the whole time. Figures. When their mother had left the room, Nori sat up and leaned over to her sister's bed. Did they really think you were bald? Yes, isn't that hysterical? Naheed held out her hand to her little sister. It was actually nice to be able just to reach out and hold her sister's hand while they lay in their beds. With all your black hair, Nori scooted closer and petted her sister's head. She took a thick strand and let it slip through her fingers around and around. Naheed, Nori said after a beat. Yeah, I'm sorry you had a bad day. It wasn't so bad, Naheed said. I can fix it tomorrow. At least I'm not bald. And both sisters dived into their pillows, trying to muffle their giggles. This is important. Here's the thing. Everyone makes mistakes. Every person in the world is guilty of not doing as much as they could, or maybe omitting some of the truth from a story to make themselves feel better. Everyone has struggles and is imperfect, because that's what it means to be a human being. The goal is to not be the best human being on the planet, because that's not possible. The goal is to be a better person than you were yesterday. And for Naheed, she seems to have figured it out. She literally says, I can fix it tomorrow. And that is the key. To know that even if you weren't the best version of yourself today, tomorrow you can and will do better if you believe in yourself and you hold yourself to a high standard, right? So we're not going to get an immediate answer on how that works out for her because obviously we're moving into a different section, and we're going to continue on with the story of Will. Now, if you take a look at the time, it seems to be a little bit out of order because, again, we were just at 9:45 bedtime in Ohio. Now we're kind of falling back to 5:45, which is around dinner time in Shanksv, Pennsylvania. So if you recall, Will did not necessarily have the most smashing of date type situations with Claire. She hung out with his friends and basically got angry and left. So let's see how he works this out. Once again, 5:45, Shanksv. The ride home wasn't exactly the way Will had imagined it would be when he realized he had invited Claire to come bike riding with them. The boys rode three across, pedaling as hard as they could. The sun was already painting colors low in the sky. Will needed to get home before dinner or his mother would be worried and then really angry when he showed up because she had been so worried. So we have a really nice piece of personification in this first paragraph. Let's see if you can find it. What in the first paragraph is being made to sound like it has a human talent, even though it doesn't? Did you catch it? The sun was already painting colors low in the sky. So the sun obviously is not human. It cannot paint. Probably doesn't even have access to watercolors or acrylics. So this is personification, remember, making something not human sound like a person. Alex had twisted his ankle. Ben had scraped his leg on a large stick that somehow found its way into the ring. And Will had bent his left pinky so far back he couldn't feel it anymore. He was going to pay the price for that one for a while. Hopefully it would heal before basketball tryouts. But he felt most like an idiot for asking Claire to join him and then ignoring her completely. He acknowledges it. He owns it. He messed up because if he wanted to just hang out with the guys and do a rough and tumble afternoon, maybe don't invite the girl you like. She'll get over it, Ben told Will. When they heard a car behind them, they fell back into a single line until it passed. You know Claire, she's not a girly girl, she's fine, Alex shouted up ahead. We should have just stopped, Will said, mostly telling himself. Ben sped up beside him. You like her, don't you? Will didn't need to answer. Hey man, I'm sorry, Alex said, dropping back on the other side. Ben and Alex got home first and Will rode the last quarter mile by himself. He could see the lights on in his kitchen window. His mom was probably making dinner. The girls were probably watching TV or taking a bath. It wasn't so different really than it had ever been. Will's dad had sometimes been home for only 5 or 6 nights a month anyway. And yet, everything was different. So this is just a reminder, Will's dad was a trucker. He traveled mostly on the roads for most of the month. So again, there's a version of Will's family that was always functional without the dad, where Will always kind of had to step up and be the pretend dad in dad's absence. So, he says everything was kind of similar, but really very different. Okay, let's continue. Will came to a stop at the end of his driveway. He looked up. It wasn't dark yet, but the sky had that hint of fall, of night coming early and taking the day away. If he got back on his bike now, he could be at Claire's house. At Claire's house in 3 minutes. And home again for dinner. He had no idea what he was going to do or say, or even if trying to talk to Claire was the right thing to do. He knew only that he had to do something, because doing nothing would feel worse. So this is kind of interesting, and it's a lesson that I really wish Naheed could pick up on as well, is that idea that, doing something when you've made a mistake, when you've hurt somebody's feelings, doing something is better than doing nothing. Even if you blunder the mistake, you've blundered and made a mistake completely, and you totally mess up the apology. being sorry matters, and it helps people to forgive us, right? So he knew he had to do something because nothing would feel worse. Again, we have a little bit of personification. Night coming early and taking the day away. Night obviously does not show up with luggage and, sit on your doorstep. It is not a person, but it's made to sound like one because this is an example of personification. Let's continue. When he turned 10, Will had a real party at the bowling alley over in Somerset. It was one of the few times his dad was going to be around on his actual birthday, and besides, hitting that 2-digit number was a big deal, wasn't it? Of course I'll be there. But that year was also the year that kids in his grade had started shifting into separate categories, some willing and others not so willingly. There were smart people and not so smart, higher math groups and lower reading levels, popular girls and the girls that sat alone, boys that could throw a ball and boys that constantly got beamed in the head with the volleyball no matter how hard they tried to return the volley. In a class so small, it just looked all the more obvious who was who. I don't know what to do about my birthday, Will told his dad. About that boy from school? Yeah, I don't really want him to come to my party. They were picking up sticks from the front lawn, sticks and branches that had fallen in the last rainstorm. When Will's dad was home, he wanted to do as many chores and repairs around the house as he could, and Will always tagged along to help. Then don't invite him. But he'll have his feelings hurt. Will threw one long branch into the woods behind their house and followed after his dad. And we were okay friends last year. Then invite him. But I don't really want him to be there. He'll ruin everything. He's gotten so weird and loud about it, too. Well, you've got to make a decision. But how? Will's dad was holding a bundle of wood and leaves in his arms. He looked just like a tree himself, tall and strong, like nothing could ever hurt him. He knew everything. Jump ahead in time and ask yourself how you will feel if you don't invite him. So Will closed his eyes. He could imagine his party, everything going so well, all the presents he would get, and the cake. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. The hot dogs and ice cream cake, and then everyone would go home, and it would have been a perfect day. Okay, Will said. I did it. Great party. His dad went on. And then, how are you going to feel when you see this boy in your class the next day? Will closed his eyes again. He would go back to school, and this kid would be the only one from his class that wasn't talking about it. Maybe everyone else would be talking about their bowling scores or asking Will if he liked their gifts or just raving about how much fun they had at this party. Everyone but that one kid. Just imagining that felt pretty bad already. So I have to decide by what will make me feel worse? Will asked his dad. Not what will make me feel better. His dad dumped his armload of branches onto a pile behind the shed. It's not about what makes you feel better or worse. If it's the right thing to do and you know it, you should just do it. Even if my party sucks, Will said. But he knew the answer. So, we're at the end of Will's section, and it ends with this big fat flashback, which teaches us a lot about who Will's dad actually was. He wasn't that kind of dad who was going to hand Will the answers and solve the problems for him. No. He tries to kind of walk him through a thought process and help him to understand that maybe, just maybe, you can't be selfish when you make decisions, right? So this is where he gets to the big part. It's not about what makes you feel better or worse. It's about doing the right thing. If it's the right thing to do, you should do it. This is exactly how Will's dad lived his life. And unfortunately, that is exactly how Will's dad died, was doing the right thing. Because the right thing is not easy, right? And so here, this philosophy is kind of put right in print for us as the readers so that the author can kind of point to this as the motive behind Will's father's life as well as his death. Additionally, in here, you had a little bit of a simile hiding on you. When Will describes his dad, he says he looks like a tree, like nothing could ever hurt him. So this is a simile. It uses that key word like, comparing dad to a tree. And then this is hyperbole. Dad doesn't actually know everything. But what dad does know is that it's important to allow Will to find the answers for himself if he wants Will to grow up to be that self-confident person who trusts his own instinct and guts. Okay? So, with that being said, my dears, we have left the world of 9-10 and we are about to enter the world of 9-11. So, the next time we get together, things are going to get really serious. If you have questions while we read, please feel free to ask. And make sure that you update that character chart because as we enter the world of 9/11, things will change and will never be the same.